Doing well today. I'm gonna screen share the source sheet in just a minute. But just by way of settling us where we are in the Torah, we're in Parshat Balak. In the book of Numbers, this is the famous talking donkey portion. And Today, what I want to focus on is the relationship between fear, power, and prophecy in the Torah, and particularly in Parshat Balak. So, follow along with me. If you have questions or insights, please feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. I will every so often maybe stop teaching, check the chat, see if there's anything to answer. Um, but yeah, we're gonna start with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right. Also, if along the way you have a pressing question or something like that, feel free to raise your hand by hitting the raise hand button. That'll make your video pop to the top of our list of people, and then we'll see you want to talk. So I'm gonna just kind of lecture here for a bit, and then I'll ask you all some questions, and then I'll see if you have answers. We'll go back and forth a little bit. I have a lot of text here, so we'll probably not get through all of it. I never do, but that's fine. So we're starting at the beginning. Balak, son of Zippor, king of the Moabites, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was alarmed because that people was so numerous. Moab dreaded the Israelites. So we have two different and kind of strange words that are translated a little weirdly here. They correspond to alarmed and dreaded. So it's vayagar and vayakatz. Yagar has a very interesting root. Gar or ger or lagur also means to dwell somewhere. In rabbinic Hebrew, it is related to conversion, people who convert into Judaism. And at the same time, here, as you see, it also can mean to treat with hostility, to attack, or to be afraid. So a true linguistic scholar would say these are probably three completely different roots, actually have no relationship to each other. They sound similar, but they're not related. They have different sources. I'm a rabbi, so I instead choose to say actually everything's interconnected in the Torah. We're not going to try to separate them all out because there is a particular kind of fear, a particular kind of alarm, a particular kind of maybe dread that we associate with the other, right? With something beyond us, with something that is out of our control and alien. And that's what I think this is referring to, is that particular kind of oh my God, I lost the word that I was going to use. Abjection is the word. To feel abjection towards something. It's something that feels like it's out of place. So that's how I would translate it, which is a bad translation for readability. Moab was abjected because that people are so numerous, no one wants to read that. But I think that there's something there about Balak feeling that kind of fear that comes with an unknown. We're gonna talk a little bit more about what this word means in other spaces. But another fear that is throughout the Bible of something that is unknown beyond, that can create abjection, is fear of God. God is also the ultimate alien, right? We can't know God. We can't really fully encounter God. So that this root is often related to the necessity of fearing God. Then you got vayakatz, which means to feel disgust, to dread, to cut off, or to demolish. Another kind of fear that is also related to a similar abjection. And we see here that it's used very famously at the beginning of Exodus. It's how the Egyptians felt about the Israelites. But in Deuteronomy, this I think is very interesting, where it says, if the prophet speaks the name of Adonai and the oracle does not come true, that oracle is not spoken by Adonai. The prophet has uttered it presumptuously. Do not stand in dread of that person. So it links this root, gor or gar, to fear of God in particular. And you do not have this kind of fear towards someone who's not actually speaking for God. So it could be also read into this if we want to really kind of stretch the linguistic fibers that that Moab's fear was in some ways a fear of God as present in Israel. We see this even more if we go down to what actually happened to the Amorites that made them scared, which is the Amorites. I'm just going to paraphrase here. You can read it if you'd like. Israel wiped out the Amorites because they didn't let them pass through their land. But it wasn't Israel really that wiped out the Amorites, it was God. And so we see the king of the Moabites afraid that this is going to happen to him too. And we will see in just a minute that how he channels that fear. But I wanted to kind of start out with a quote, a far quote from the Torah, from beyond the Torah, from Abraham Joshua Heschel about prophets. That a prophet is a man who feels fiercely, excuse the gendered nature of it. It was, God has thrust a burden upon his soul, and he has bowed and stunned at man's fierce greed. Frightful is the agony of man. No human voice can convey its full terror. Prophecy is the voice that God has lent to the silent agony. So the same core of fear that we see here in Deuteronomy being related to the prophets, and then we see here in being related to the Moabites, I think is important in the rest of the story, because the rest of the story is about a prophet, a non-Israelite prophet, Balam, but it's about a prophet and how the prophet reacts to Balak's fear and how Balak reacts to Balak's fear. And all of this is a big kind of investigation through story of the theme of fear, of power, and of prophecy. We'll get the chat real quick. Let's see. Yes, Miriam is a prophet. Devorah is a prophet. Rahab is later in the Bible is a prophet, I think is her name. There are female prophets. The donkey does not have a name. And yes, Andrea, I agree. This dare fear does feel like that same sort of like xenophobia. Who does Heschel thinks the prophets fear? That's a really good question. Let me look at this again. I think that what he's saying here is that to be alive as a human is to have fear, is to be full of fear that we can't actually articulate, that we have a constant existential dread as humans that we don't really know how to articulate sometimes, which is why we have therapists and also sometimes drugs that help us with this fear that is always boiling inside of us. And that prophets are given the capacity by God to put that fear into words. And the power of a prophet is the ability to put that fear into words. This fear is not Jenny. I don't think so. I think this fear is fear. Um, yes, Arnold, that I love that actually. That it's not just humans that have this kind of fear. Animals have this fear. When you see animals scurrying around in the forest, like a smaller mammal afraid of a larger mammal or whatever, deer afraid of wolves, deer afraid of us. There is this fear that you can see on them. Um, and that's what keeps them alive. And perhaps maybe humans, to a certain degree, um, we still have that instinct, but we don't live in the same kind of context. So this fear gets channeled in other directions. Let's see. Um, Sharon, um, the Torah says explicitly to love the ger, and to love the ger as you love yourself. And I think that love and fear are in direct contradiction to each other. So, according to the Torah, we don't have the right to fear the ger. It's like very explicit. I think it's Leviticus 18, somewhere in there. Um, great. So we're going to get into the meat of the story of how Balak's fear drives him. So Balak sent messengers to Balam, son of Beor in Pethor, which is by the Euphrates in the land of his kinsfolk, to invite him, saying, there is a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Come then, put a curse upon this people for me, since they are too numerous for me, because I can thus defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whomever you bless is blessed indeed, and whomever you curse is cursed. Um, and this is like an interesting echo of earlier text in the Torah where God says this about the Avot. Whoever you bless will be blessed, or whoever blesses you will be blessed, whoever curses you will be cursed. God says to Abraham. But here it says Balaam, whoever he blesses is blessed, and whoever he curses is cursed. So we see here that Balaam has a reputation, right? And he's a powerful um, let's what word do they use a word for who he is or what he is at this point? They actually don't, which is interesting. They don't call him a Navi here. He's called a Navi elsewhere, but he has a reputation. But we also see immediately that he's talking to God. He's talking to the God of the Israelites. He's not talking to some other God. He's not talking to Baal or Asherah. He's talking to the God of the Israelites, which is kind of crazy, right? Like you've got this non-Israelite who's talking to God, and they're talking in like like Balaam is very respectful, but they're talking in a pretty familiar way. So um, this king is trying to get Balaam to come and curse the Israelites, and God says to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You must not curse that people, for they are blessed." And so Balaam listens, and he goes into the messengers that Balak sends and says, "Go back to your country, for Adonai will not let me go with you." So he's even saying, like, God's got the power here. I don't have any power to do anything. God has this power. Um, so they listen, but then Balak sends more dignitaries. So we got to keep in mind the power balance here. Balaam is well known, but he's not a king. Balak is the king of an entire people. And he starts off sending some like messengers, and then he sends some like more powerful messengers. And they say to Balaam, thus says Balak, son of Zippor, please do not refuse to come to me. I will reward you richly, and I will do anything you ask and damn this people for me. Balaam replied to Balak's officials, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything big or little, contrary to the command of my God Adonai. Which is also like he says, my God Adonai. Adonai Elohai. Weird, right? This guy's not an Israelite. Um, that night God came to Balaam and said to him, If the agents have come to invite you, you can go with them, but whatever I command you, you have to do that. And so we've got still this interplay of fear. Balak is scared of the Israelites. Balaam is scared of God. And someone said that in the chat earlier, that Balam appears to be God-fearing. Yes. And he's so scared of Adonai that he's willing to tell Balak no, until God says that he can say yes. Um, so again, these two different modes of fear. Um, and this goes back to the use of tagur in this portion and then in Deuteronomy, that that kind of fear from Balak was upon the Israelites rather than upon God. Right? Balak is not afraid of God. Balak is afraid of the Israelites. Balaam is afraid of God. It doesn't say that explicitly, but we can tell. All right. So I'm going to check the chat again, look at some more of what folks are sharing. Yes. So Sharon, as you're saying, um, Midrash and rabbinic text treats Balaam as a horrible villain. Like the rabbinic tradition, Balaam, like I'm going straight on the like Torah text here, but Sharon is correct. Throughout rabbinic text, Balaam is a horrible villain. Susie, do you have a question? Let me see. Not sure how
I've
to.
got
There we
it.
go.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so here's where I'm a little confused.
Mhm.
It's a good thing that Balaam recognizes Adonai as God, and that he is respectful of him, which is, I believe, why Hashem also speaks to him.
Mhm.
Where he's a bad guy, obviously, is that he does his thing, which is like not good. My question is about the fear thing. Fear of Hashem is legitimate because he is omnipotent and all powerful and in charge of everything. Fear often is irrational in other situations because it's out of ignorance. But I think in the case of Balak, it's not out of ignorance. I think in the case of Balak, it's that he is assuming the Israelites will do what he would do in this situation. So even though they are saying we want to come through your land peacefully and not disturb anything and pay for everything, he goes, not a chance. They want to come in and subjugate us because that's who he is. And so he is seeing the Israelites through his own eyes.
Yeah. He's projecting on them what. Well, but he also did see them wipe out the Amorites. So he's
After,
kind of, after
but
they
they were
rejected. Yeah.
denied
Yeah.
passage.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right. I also think that one of the things that fear does to us, this kind of fear, because there's also the phrase for fearing God that is used most often is a completely different Hebrew root. It's yirah. Yirat Adonai is a different kind of fear, right? It's a different word for fear, and it's a different kind of fear. That word is not used here. Um, so the kind of awe of God, fear of God, not necessarily like, oh my God, God's going to punish me, but like the recognition that there is an all-powerful force out there that has control over everything that we don't understand and that we can like try to engage, but none of us are able to truly engage, is a different word for fear, yira. This is a fear of the alien, the tagur, a fear of that leads to oppression. Um, and that's what we see here. Um, let's see. We have a little bit more in the chat, and then I'll move on to let's see. Yes, Harry, and that's Yirat Adonai. So I'm trying to separate out kinds of fear. Um, and Juliet, he kept asking because they kept coming, right? Like the situation changed, and he still kept asking. And Sharon, so having fear of Hashem, um, yes, is being in awe, but that's Yirat Adonai. If we were Tagur Adonai rather than Yirat Adonai, like it's a different kind of fear. Um, there are different modes of fear, right? Um, so Ginger, I don't agree. I think God says you can do it. You just have to do what I tell you. And then we we're gonna get to the donkey part as well. Um, and the donkey part uh, teaches us a whole lot, I think, about fear and what this issue of fear and power is leading us to think about. So, um, when Balaam arose in the morning, he saddled his donkey and departed with the Moabite dignitaries. But God was mad at his going. Um, so a messenger of God took a position in his way as an adversary. So v'yacharef v'yichar af Elohim ki holechu. So it says, let's see. Yeah, so it is singular. So he's mad that Balaam is going. God is mad that Balaam is going. Um, and so he sets up a messenger of God in the way, Satan lo. So this is one of the few times in the Torah that the word Satan that is often that has become the name Satan, even though in the Torah you can see this is a verb, not a name, to stand against him as an adversary. One of the other places this arises is the book of Job, when there's an adversary against Job to test him. So it's not just an adversary, it's also someone that's going to test. And this test is illustrative, right? This is an illustrative test. It is not just like seeing how Balaam is going to react. It is here to teach us. Like that's what the whole book of Job is. That's what the whole Torah is, right? So this story with an angel as this adversary is here to teach us something. So we're supposed to be reading it as a parable, not just as like a literal history in any kind of way. So he was riding on his donkey with his two servants alongside. Um, I'm seeing it's interesting actually. I don't know what to make of this, but there's a lot of linguistic similarities here between ways that God talks to Abraham and the Torah describes Abraham and Balaam in this story. So, like, we've got Vayakom Baboker, which is the language around Abraham getting up before the Akedah, another test. Um, we've got the two servants, which Abraham also had. And then we also have Balak saying that whoever he curses, Balaam curses will be cursed and blessed will be blessed, which is like an inversion of the language God uses for Abraham. So this is kind of like an inversion of the Abraham story in a certain kind of way. He also bargains with God, right, in the same way that Abraham does. So this is like an inversion of the Abraham story in an interesting kind of way. Um, so the donkey can see this messenger of God standing in the way with his drawn swords. And the donkey swerves from the road and goes into the field. And Balaam beats the donkey to get her back onto the road. Hey, we were also asking if there are any female prophets. This donkey is a female donkey, and she can see the angel of God and Balaam can't. So maybe she's a prophet too, right? We were talking about animals and animalistic fear earlier as well, and what it means for an animal to feel fear. And we have that coming up here as well. This comparison, not like it doesn't directly say you must compare these two things, but by putting these stories side by side, it's telling us compare the donkey's fear to Balak's fear and Balaam's fear. Like that's how this is all constructed, right? Um, so the donkey is scared of God, not of Balaam. The messenger of Adonai then stationed himself in a lane between the vineyards with a fence on either side. The ass, seeing the messenger of Adonai, pressed herself against the wall and squeezed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he beat her again. So Balaam, excuse me, is trying to make the donkey do something that God doesn't want her to do. And what happens? He gets hurt, right? Like he's not paying attention to the wider context. He's not even considering that this donkey may have more information than he does, which it does. He's instead just acting with the same kind of sense of power and control that Balak is to him. He's showing no sense of sensitivity to the circumstances or thinking more broadly about how God could be playing out here. So once more, the messenger of Adonai moved forward and stationed himself on a spot so narrow there was no room to swerve right or left. So again, the other thing is there's three times. So this number three is going to be uh, important as well. When the donkey now saw the messenger of Adonai, she laid down under Balaam. Balaam was furious and beat the donkey with a stick. Again, we've got this Balaam not paying attention to the wider context, just acting reflexively, treating this donkey very poorly. And so we then have God open the donkey's mouth, which is prophecy, right? Like God speaking through, opening someone's mouth is prophecy. So this donkey's a prophet. And she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have beaten me these three times?" Balaam said to the donkey, "You have made a mockery of me." I want to see what the language is here. He heat alalta. I should have done this before. I'm not going to do it now to see if that word is used elsewhere in the Torah portion because it probably is. The lo yesh. Okay, I'm. If I had a sword with me, I'd kill you. He doesn't have a sword. He's real pissed, right? The donkey said to Balaam, "Look, I'm the donkey that you've been riding all along until this day. Have I been in the habit of doing thus to you?" And he answered, "No." Then Adonai uncovered Balaam's eyes, and he saw the messenger of Adonai standing in the way, his drawn sword in his hand. Thereupon he bowed right down to the ground. Right? Vayigal, that is the language of revelation. That is the language used of like revelation of Torah, the Higgalah. The messenger of Adonai said to him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these three times? It is I who came out as an adversary, for this errand is obnoxious to me. And when the donkey saw me, she shied away because of me those three times. If she had not shied away from me, you are the one I should have killed while sparing her." Balaam said to the messenger of Adonai, "I erred because I did not know that you were standing in my way. If you still disapprove, I will turn back." But the messenger of Adonai said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you must say nothing except what I tell you." So Balaam went on with Balak's dignitaries. All right. So this is an amazing story, all about power and fear and prophecy and how God functions in the world and how we function. It's just so rich. And people usually use it as an example of like why the Torah is just a bunch of stupid fairy tales. There's a talking donkey. No, this is like really powerful, rich stuff if you dig under it. Let's see. Jack, would love to hear your question.
It actually isn't a question.
Oh, sorry, you got remuted.
Oh,
There
can you
go.
hear me now?
Yeah,
One is the fear of God is not general. It's if we interpret that into our world, it's God fearing, which is punishment if you don't listen to what God has to say. It isn't to fear God in general. The other is that I have always had a question is why do we have talking animals? You had mentioned that God was speaking through the donkey, but was God speaking through the serpent in Genesis? Not so. I mean,
no.
I would like to know. We all know that animals can't speak, yet in the Torah twice now, animals take a guiding role in speaking to the people that they're with. Is there any comment on that, on why we have speaking animals?
Because the Torah is not a literal text, is what I would say. I don't think that it is trying to report literal history or literal, like it's not a scientific textbook. It's a
Well, I
collection of traditional stories in which truth is revealed through the form of story. It's also a collection of laws too. Like it's a mixture. It's an anthology of lots of different types of literature.
I hate to say that doesn't answer my question, I think, but I mean, of all things, to have animals convey a message in language that we understand
Mhm.
is I can't
Because the
figure
animals
that out.
symbolize something. These are it's literature, right? Like the
Right.
same reason that you like in any other mythology, animals symbolize something more than just the animal itself. Like a snake symbolizes something more than just like it as a character. A snake itself is symbolic in like ancient Near Eastern text and thought of transformation, right? Because snakes shed their skin. And so the snake is a symbol of transformation and is offering a transformation to the humans. The donkey is symbolic of a lower being here, right? And we are seeing like a hierarchy of characters play out here. We've got God on top, we've got Balak, we've got Balam, we've got God going around Balak to Balam, and we've got God going around Balam to the donkey. So what we're getting is a parallel, is literary parallelism that Balaam is to Balak as the donkey is to Balaam, which is what we're about to see. And Balak ends up learning the same the same lesson that Balaam does of like you got to listen to God no matter like you can think you understand what's going on, you can believe that you're in control, but you're limited. You're a limited being, and so like pay attention to that. When something is pushing back against what you want in life, don't always just keeping pushing forward. Stop and think about why that might be happening. Like, why is this donkey that has always like been a good donkey right now acting totally different? Stop and check that out instead of just like beating it and telling it to do what you want, right? Like that's it's you have to look at it literarily as opposed to literally. Think of it as like something you would do in an English class as opposed to a history class. Gonna look through the chat real quick. Okay, why was God mad after he said it was okay to go? God still got because God didn't want to have to deal with any of this. God just wanted everything to work out the way that God wanted, and instead, this became a test and a series of lessons, right? For Balaam and Balak, and primarily for Balak. But I don't think it's a test of Balaam. I think it's that God is just annoyed that this is happening at all because God just wants things to continue moving forward. And instead, there's this kind of um, like if you think of God as well, like I was saying about the animals, God's a character in this story, right? Like I don't think of this as like literally the God that is depicted in the Torah is a certain facet of the theology I believe in as depicted literarily, right? God is caught up in this story as much as everyone else is. And so the character of God in this story, because it's a story and God's a character in it, um, is now being forced to participate in a way in the story that God doesn't want to participate in. And we see through this, everybody here is at loggerheads. Everybody is experiencing a frustration of what they want. Some of them are driven by fear that is leading to that frustration. Some of them are driven by power. Some of them are driven by God. And God is the only one that actually has the full power. But God, even in this instance, is stuck in this story like everybody else. And I think that that's what that like aggravation is like this shouldn't even have to happen. Y'all should know that I'm here with the Israelites. don't fight with me about it. Just let us go through and things will be fine. And it just isn't working out like that. Bernice, that's a beautiful drosh on what adversary could mean or Satan could mean. And it's not even necessarily an external being, it's something within us. Um, um, yes, yes. Beating an animal is a result of fear of loss of control. I agree completely. That's where I see the fear in this part. Um, how come Balam didn't know the right decision? Balam, because Balam's not perfect. Balam's a person. Um, the donkey be a symbol of Balam's stubbornness. Great, Eleanor. Very good read. Yeah, because throughout the the Torah, like it says there are many places where it says that like someone is stubborn like an ass or like a donkey, like it says that. So yes, it is about stubbornness and maybe even how fear can lead to stubbornness. Um, Arnold, there's lots of messengers that have swords. This one does. The messenger that comes down to the Malach that comes down to the Garden of Eden has a sword to guard the Garden of Eden. Balaam is being more stubborn than a donkey, yes. Why were Balaam's eyes covered? To teach us, right? The story is to teach us. Um, yes. Roberta Gross Torres, Balaam is acting as an intermediary between Balak and God. And that is how prophets function throughout the Tanakh, right? They often like have a king that they are talking to and God that they are talking to, like the prophet Nathan and David, or like all of the prophets are like this intermediary between a king and God. This is before there are Israelite kings, so like that's not an issue in the Israelite story at this point, but later it is. Um, okay. Let's see. Okay. Yes, Juliet. I read this as like kind of a psycho literary drama. The adversary probably and the garden probably does represent something internal to us as well. Um, all right, so I'm gonna run through here real quick. Balaam eventually makes it to to Balak. They're gonna go and curse um well, Balaam tells Balak he can't curse the Israelites. He warns him a bunch of times. He says, I can't do it. I can only do what God tells me to do. Like, you can tell me to keep doing this and you can pay me, but I can only do what God tells me to do. So Adonai became manifest to Balaam and put a word in his mouth, which is very, Vayasim Davar Bafiv is very similar language to, let's see, where is it? By Yiftach Adonai at Pi Ha'aton, very, very similar language. Not exactly the same, but very similar. And then he said, return to Balak and say it. So Balaam went to Balak and found him standing beside the offerings. They made like a bunch of sacrifices to try to get God to do what they wanted. And Balak said, what did God say? And Balaam says, Up, Balak, attend, give ear unto me, son of Zippor. God is not a capricious human, nor a regretful mortal. Would God speak and not act, promise and not fulfill? I was given to bless, and not reverse. No harm is in sight for Jacob, no woe in view for Israel. Their God Adonai is with them, their kings echo within. God brought them from Egypt like the horns of the ox. Lo, there is no augury in Jacob, no divining in Israel. Jacob is told at once, yea, Israel, what God has planned. Lo, a people that rises like a lioness, leaps like a lion, rests not till it has feasted on prey and drunk the blood of the slain. And Balak is like, come on, man. Like, stop. Don't curse them. Don't bless them. You're saying good things about them. You're doing the opposite. Stop it. Um, and Balaam says, no, I told you, this is all I can do. The reason that I brought this one, there's 3 different segments of blessings rather than curses that happen. The reason I brought this one is it says there's no augury in Jacob, no divining in Israel. And the word here, actually, I hadn't noticed this before. For the kilo nachash, Bayakov, Nachash has many different meanings, one of which is serpent, is the word for the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Velo kesem Yisrael, no magic. It says divining kesem is often translated as magic. This is just saying, like, there's nothing you can do that the Israelites do to change God's will. They don't try. They know what God wants and they just do it. And so, like, you all trying to do this is ridiculous. You can't change what's happening here. Stop trying. And so this happens a couple more times. And then Balaam says to Balak, I called you to damn my enemies. Instead, you have blessed them these 3 times. Again, that's why the 3 in the donkey piece is important. It's a perfect parallel between Balaam and the donkey and Balak and Balaam. Back with you at once to your own place. I was going to reward you richly, but Adonai has denied you the reward. Balaam replied to Balak, but I even told the messengers you sent to me, you could give me as much money as you want. I can't do anything that God doesn't want. And now as I go back to my people, let me inform you of what this people will do to your people in days to come. And he does this whole prophecy about how Balak and the Moabites are completely screwed. So I made it through everything I wanted to make it through. Thank you all. Let's see. Let me take a couple more questions. If I can do a little bit overtime, is that possible? No? Yes?
Yeah,
No.
we can go like 2 minutes over, and I have
Okay.
had the habit of asking our Torah leaders to leave us with an intention for the Shabbat.
Oh, sure. Great. Andrea, we'll take your question, then I'll lead you with a Shabbat tension.
I'm wondering if there's another place in Torah or anywhere in the Tanakh where a prophet is called upon to bless or curse somebody rather than I started to say just be a conduit of God as if that were something minor, but rather than being a conduit of God's word. I can't think of any place. I mean, this seems like a very unique role for a prophet.
That's a great question. Because God's the one that blesses all of the well, no, yeah. At the end of the Torah, when Jacob is giving all of his blessings to all of his sons, it's very, very similar. It's the same kind of poetry, similar layout. And yeah. So that's a good parallel, Jacob and his sons and the blessings at the end. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best one. Is there anything else like that? I mean, there's the blessings and the curses in Deuteronomy with Moses blessing and cursing. Why are you saying no? Yeah, it is.
The case of Jacob is he's blessing his sons, and he's not called upon by somebody to offer a blessing. And I think in the blessings and curses, it's God's blessings and curses that are just they're not really blessings and curses. They're warnings. They're
that's what's happening here too. God is telling Balaam what to say, and they are warnings to Balak. Like, you can keep trying to do this, but it's not going to work.
Right, but the initial that I think that's right. I think that's what God turns it into. But initially, Balak is calling on Balaam as a noted prophet to And I'm wondering if if
Got
that's
it.
what,
I understand what you're okay. I misunderstood what your question was at first. The idea of a prophet as someone you like pay to do something is
you
the
pay to do
question.
something, especially to offer a curse or a blessing.
Yeah, I think that is no, I don't think there's anywhere else. And that is certainly not the case for the prophets couldn't do that, right? That would make them a false prophet. In
Mhm.
in the rest of the Tanakh. Like they can only but Balam is like trying to get his money anyway. But yeah, no, like that it doesn't work because a true prophet is only saying what God tells him to say.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a great question. I don't I'm sure that was like a major kind of role in the ancient Near East, so that there were people that would be called upon to do blessings and curses and stuff like that. Okay, an intention for Shabbat. May you all enter into Shabbat free of any kind of fear other than rootedness in your knowledge of God's great power, and also with great faith in God's beneficence towards you during the Shabbat. May you feel the wings of the Shekhinah around you as you rest the Shabbat, and may you feel no fear of any person, beast, or natural disaster. May you feel only peace and joy.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you all for being here. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.